I'm your real mother. Black waitress confronts billionaire's son. His reaction will leave you stunned. What if everything you believed about your life was built on a lie? Marcus Rivera straightened his Armani tie as he stepped into the small diner on the outskirts of Chicago, a place he'd never normally visit. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air as rain tapped gently against the windows. He was here for a business meeting about acquiring the building, another property to add to his father's billion-dollar empire. But as he settled into a worn booth, something unexpected happened. A black woman in her 60s, wearing a simple waitress uniform, approached his table. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured his coffee, and when their eyes met, she gasped softly. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the diner's quiet hum. "My sweet boy. I never thought I'd see you again." Marcus looked up, confused and slightly annoyed. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" The woman's eyes filled with tears as she spoke words that would change everything. "Son, I'm your real mother." Marcus stared at the woman, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "Excuse me," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. The waitress, whose name tag read Dorothy, pulled out a faded photograph from her apron pocket. Her hands shook as she placed it on the table. It showed a young black woman holding a newborn baby with the same distinctive birthmark on his left wrist that Marcus had always carried. "Your father, Richard Rivera, he was different back then," Dorothy said quietly, glancing around to make sure no other customers were listening. "We were young, and he promised me the world. But when I got pregnant, his family had other plans." Marcus's mind raced. His father had always told him his mother died in childbirth, that it was too painful to talk about. He'd grown up with nannies and boarding schools, believing he was the son of Richard Rivera and his deceased first wife. Dorothy sat down across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. "They took you from me when you were 3 days old. Paid me to disappear, threatened to destroy my family if I ever tried to contact you." Her voice broke slightly. "Your father married Elena 6 months later, and the world believed you were hers." Marcus felt his world tilting. Elena Rivera, the woman he'd called mother for 32 years, the socialite who'd raised him with cold efficiency but never warmth. "This is impossible," he whispered, but even as he said it, memories started flooding back. The way his father always changed the subject when he asked about his early childhood. The lack of baby photos before age 3. Elena's distant affection that never quite felt maternal. Dorothy reached across the table, her weathered hand touching his. "I've watched you from afar all these years, baby. Seen your picture in magazines, followed your success. I'm so proud of who you've become, but I've ached every single day for my lost son." Marcus pulled his hand away, standing up abruptly. "This is insane. You're some waitress trying to con money from my family." But Dorothy didn't flinch at his harsh words. Instead, she pulled out a small jewelry box from her purse. Inside was a tiny gold bracelet with Marcus engraved on it, sized for a newborn. "I put this on you the day you were born," she said softly. "Your father's security team took it off when they took you. I kept it all these years, hoping someday." She trailed off, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Marcus stared at the bracelet, and suddenly a memory surfaced. He was very young, maybe 4 or 5, asking his father about a faint tan line around his wrist. His father had quickly dismissed it, saying it was nothing. The memory felt like a punch to his gut. "Why now?" Marcus asked, his voice quieter but still guarded. "After all these years, why approach me now?" Dorothy wiped her eyes with a napkin. "Because I'm dying, son. Cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less." She paused, watching his face carefully. "I couldn't leave this world without telling you the truth. Without letting you know that you were wanted, that you were loved from the very first moment you drew breath." The diner seemed to fade around them. Marcus felt 32 years of his life reorganizing itself in his mind. Every cold interaction with Elena, every time he'd felt like an outsider in his own family, every moment he'd wondered why he never felt that unconditional mother's love his friends talked about. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. I need proof, Marcus said finally, his voice hollow. DNA tests, documentation, something more than photographs and jewelry. Dorothy nodded, reaching into her purse again. I've been saving money for years to hire a lawyer. I have hospital records, birth certificates, everything. I just never had the courage to use them until now. 3 days later, Marcus sat in his penthouse office, staring at the DNA results that had arrived that morning. 99.7% probability of maternity. The scientific words blurred as tears he'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. Everything Dorothy had told him was true. His entire life had been built on an elaborate lie orchestrated by his father. He thought about all the times he'd felt empty despite his wealth, all the nights he'd wondered why he felt so disconnected from the woman who raised him. Elena had done her duty, certainly, but there had never been that fierce protective love he'd seen other mothers show their children. Now he understood why. His phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. I'm in the hospital, room 314 at St. Mary's. Please don't feel obligated to come. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. Marcus's hands trembled as he read the message. Here was a woman who'd been robbed of her child, who was facing death alone, and she was still more concerned about his feelings than her own needs. That evening, Marcus found himself standing outside Dorothy's hospital room. Through the slightly open door, he could see her lying in bed, reading a worn Bible. The room was sparse, with only a few get-well cards from what appeared to be co-workers at the diner. No family photos, no flowers from children or grandchildren. She'd spent 32 years alone, carrying the secret of her stolen child. When he knocked softly, her face lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. Marcus, you came. I got the results, he said quietly, pulling a chair close to her bed. Dorothy, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to process this. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. You don't have to say anything, baby. I just needed you to know the truth. I needed you to know that letting them take you was the hardest thing I ever did, but I was young and scared, and they convinced me it was better for you. Tell me about that day, Marcus said, surprising himself with the request. Tell me about when I was born. Dorothy's eyes grew soft with memory. You were the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen. You had these tiny perfect fingers, and when you wrapped them around mine, I knew I'd never love anything or anyone the way I loved you. I sang to you, held you, promised I'd always protect you. Her voice broke. And then I failed. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, 32 years of wondering where he belonged finally finding an answer. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. You didn't fail, he whispered. You were robbed. We both were. The next morning, Marcus walked into his father's downtown office without an appointment. Richard Rivera looked up from his mahogany desk, surprised to see his son's grim expression. Marcus, what's wrong? You look terrible. Marcus placed the DNA results on the desk. I met my real mother. The color drained from his father's face. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of an expensive clock on the wall. Finally, Richard spoke. I can explain. Can you? Marcus's voice was deadly calm. Can you explain 32 years of lies? Can you explain taking a newborn from his mother and making her disappear? Can you explain letting me believe the woman who raised me was my biological mother, when she could barely stand to be in the same room with me? Richard stood up, walking to the window. It was different then, Marcus. Society wasn't ready for what Dorothy and I had. My family, the business, everything would have been destroyed. I did what I thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone? Marcus laughed bitterly. Dorothy has spent 32 years working as a waitress, living in poverty, watching her son from a distance. She's dying alone because you stole her child and threatened her into silence. How was that best for her? His father turned around, and for the first time in his life, Marcus saw his father look truly old. I loved her, you know. I really did. But I was weak, and I let my family pressure me into choosing money and status over love. It's the biggest regret of my life. Well, now you get to live with more than regret, Marcus said, standing up. I'm giving Dorothy half of my inheritance. She's going to get the best medical care money can buy, and I'm going to spend whatever time she has left getting to know my real mother. Richard's face crumpled. Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes, but I raised you, I loved you. No, Marcus said firmly but without anger. You provided for me. There's a difference. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. For the first time in his life, Marcus walked out of his father's office feeling free. 6 months later, Dorothy sat in the beautiful sunroom of the private medical facility where she was receiving treatment. The experimental therapy Marcus had arranged was working better than anyone had hoped. Her cancer was in remission, and for the first time in decades, she was surrounded by love. Marcus visited every day, sometimes bringing takeout from the diner where they'd first reunited, sometimes just sitting quietly while she told him stories about her life, her dreams, and the son she'd never stopped loving. He learned that she'd named him Marcus because it meant warrior, and she'd somehow known he'd need that strength. He discovered that his love for music came from her, that his quick laugh was hers, and that his stubborn streak definitely ran in the family. I have something for you, Dorothy said one afternoon, pulling out a wrapped box. Inside was a quilt she'd been making for 32 years, adding a square each year on his birthday. Each square told a story of what she imagined he might be doing that year, from his first steps to his college graduation to his business successes. It was a tapestry of a mother's love, stitched together with hope and tears. Marcus held the quilt close, feeling the love sewn into every stitch. I have something for you too, he said, pulling out legal documents. I bought the diner. It's yours now, free and clear. And I'm starting a foundation in your name to help other mothers who've been separated from their children. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son, no longer the confused young man who'd walked into her diner, but a man who'd found his way home. You know what the best part is, she said, taking his hand. All those years, I worried that without me, you might not know how to love. But look at you. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know. As the sun set through the windows, Marcus finally understood what home felt like. Not a place, but a person. Not wealth or status, but the simple truth of being known and loved completely. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of love, truth, and the bonds that can never truly be broken.